the news this week that actually a reflection simply on the healing miracle that we have here is not what was happening at this time. We have, after all, spent the last 3 weeks looking at various different healing miracles. And much as you're aware of my reservations about these passages and also the joys that come out of them, it seemed that maybe this is an opportunity not to do this one this time. The part of the passage, in fact, which really stands out is the short passage regarding the children coming to Jesus. And I think in some respects, we need to look at that as our stepping stone into what happens next. The disciples had a brilliant idea about protecting Jesus, and I'm sure they had the best motivation. And yet, the way they expressed their devotion was effectively to determine who was and who was not worthy of approaching God, being regarded as a full human being. And that sort of exclusion, much as it might have been done without malice, leads on to horrible stuff. And I was very clear that I needed the children to leave this morning, because what we're doing for most of the rest of this time that I'm speaking to you is considering what happens tomorrow on the Holocaust Memorial Day. And I've always intended to commemorate this in whichever Sunday is closest to the 27th of January. If we don't have regard for history, we are doomed to repeat it. And then there's an incarnational thing as well. Do we or do we not follow a God who came into the world with all its hurt, with all its sin, with all its muck? And if we do claim to follow a God who came into the world with all its hurt and its sin and its muck, we can't then avoid history and stuff that's going on now, where people are hurting. So, to start off with, we are going to show 2 film clips from quite a harrowing film. You may very well recognize what the film is. On each of the clips, they are both in black and white. However, look carefully. I want you to watch out for the girl in the red coat. You may very well look at Rwanda. Remember that in the 1980s? We may very well look at Bosnia. This year, we are commemorating 30 years of the Bosnian massacres, and maybe prospectively this past 18 months. The jury may be out, but it's certainly a conversation that needs to be had. The question is, how do we respond, particularly as people of faith, and prevent it from happening again? What can we do? Who are we as people of God that will prevent scenes like we saw in the film clips from being repeated? Perhaps we could have the next slide. A number of months ago, I was in the middle of London on a demonstration, and I was actually walking with a group of Jewish women. And this was the placard they had made up. Never again meant never again for anyone. Perhaps if we could move to the next slide. We are called to play our part as Christians, as people of faith. This is the call of the cross, and links back to the brief part of the reading we had earlier on. When Jesus died on the cross, it was not exclusive. It wasn't, well, I'm doing this for you and not you. And definitely not you. The universality of what we believe happened on the cross must be who we are as people of God, as people of faith. Because if not, then all is lost. In the run-up to this Sunday, I was able to have conversation and get some material from someone in the church who had a relative in the European Holocaust. And I got from them quite a bit of material, some of which I've put into what I'm saying now. And you can read and hear the stories of those who survived in many, many sources, some online, some in books. And then the question of what do we as people of faith do that stops this happening again? And these 3 points came out of the material that I was sent. Avoid extremes of exclusion, speak truth to power, act where we can in our daily living. The first one would seem to be obvious, and yet it's very easy to fall into traps as people gather and say, well, it's them. These are the people who are the cause of our problems. Maybe people of a particular faith group, a particular ethnic group, people arriving by boats, people who are just actually not like us. Frankly, it's them. And those conversations are difficult to get out of when frankly, it's them. And yet, as people of faith, we have to remember both the cross and Jesus refusing to let people be kept from him, even children who weren't actually people, of course. Jesus refused to let people be kept from him who needed to approach him. This should be us as well. Even the people we go are beyond the pale. How they dress, ethnicity, faith group, sexuality. We cannot be part of a system or groups which points to them versus us. I'll move to the third point. Act where we can in our daily living, maybe challenge as things come up, but also watch who we are, our thoughts and our language. So easily we can be careless with our language, denigrating and demeaning other people. How often have we heard Essex girl jokes? And yet for every Essex girl joke, every woman is a little bit less safe on the streets. If we catch ourselves with our language, if we catch ourselves with our attitudes, our conversations, oh, it's a bit of banter. It's just a joke. But enough just a jokes will inevitably lead to the scenes that we saw a few moments ago. They have to be stopped. And the place to stop them isn't for us to go, you can't say that. If we're serious, we need to be looking at ourselves in the mirror. I can't say that. I can't use that language for someone who doesn't look like me, have the same attitude or faith or whatever it is. Maybe sexuality, even political opinion. We cannot allow ourselves to think that we denigrate other people, who, after all, Jesus died on the cross to prove his love for. If we don't watch our own mouths, then the scenes we have just seen are only a step away. And so we return to speaking truth to power, using words, not so much watching our tongues on this one, but using words for good as we can. I fancy that I'm quite good with words. I use them a lot, don't I? I stand here every Sunday and use lots and lots and lots of words. But for an example of speaking truth to power, I'm going to defer to someone who's better. When sometimes being loud isn't what counts in speaking truth to power. Speaking with grace is what counts when we're trying to head off the attitudes and the structures that lead to burning bodies in fields. To power. We're going to sing again, and the words will be on the screen. Dear Lord and Father of mankind, forgive our foolish ways.